at 4 a.m., in a chilly practice room, where the only sounds were the soft hum of the air conditioner and the dim yellow light spilling across the floor, Vijay Singh sat motionless beside the golf bag that had followed him for nearly 4 decades. The 62-year-old man is one of the greatest legends modern golf has ever produced. 34 PGA Tour wins, 13 European Tour titles, 3 dazzling majors, and countless records for durability and intensity that forced the entire world to bow in respect. He had beaten the biggest names of his era, stood atop the world ranking in 2004 after a mythical season with 9 victories, a record no golfer has touched since. People called him the Big Fijian, but to anyone who ever watched him practice, he was more like a machine forged from iron, hitting hundreds of wedges a day, thousands of swings, never partying, never chasing fame, just sun, sweat, and a relentless drive no one could match. From a poor kid in Fiji picking up range balls to survive, Vijay Singh clawed his way onto the biggest stage in American sport, with nothing but calloused hands and a will carved from stone. That's the half of the story the world knows, the bright half, the glorious half, the half that got his name etched into history. But the next 250 words tell a truth the television lights have never reached. At 62, behind every trophy, every perfect swing, is a body quietly cracking day by day. His back hurts so badly that every morning he has to sit perfectly still for minutes just waiting for the muscles to loosen. His knees swell as if they're carrying the entire weight of his past. And sleep, the thing everyone else gets for free, has become an exhausting negotiation between pain and exhaustion. Years of silent grinding made him great, but they also made him more alone than any champion ever should be. He was misunderstood, humiliated by false accusations, doubted by the entire world even though all he ever did was keep his head down and work. And now when the applause has grown quiet, it's just him in this dark practice room, still raising the club every morning like he's fighting time itself with nothing but his own will. Because for Vijay Singh, quitting has never been an option. It's that refusal to ever stop fighting, even when the body screams, even when the heart is tired, that makes people choke up when they see him today. If you want to keep walking beside this legend on his tear-soaked but extraordinary journey, hit subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. And if Vijay's story has touched your heart, leave a like as a tribute to the man who has never bowed. Vijay Singh's childhood in Lautoka, Fiji, was unlike any origin story of athletes born to become legends. There were no lush practice greens, no private coaches, no shiny titanium clubs, just poverty, silence, and a loneliness that sank into the boy's soul from his earliest years. The Singh family lived in a tiny house where every morning footstep made the wooden floor creak, 6 people sleeping shoulder to shoulder with sea wind whistling through the cracks. They couldn't afford shoes, let alone golf clubs. Vijay practiced with a broken club his father patched together with tape and hope. The balls were old, misshapen rubber ones he picked up at the range, and in the poorest place, under the worst conditions, the biggest dream took root. But a poor kid's dream was always something others laughed at. In Fiji, golf was for tourists, for wealthy families, for people who knew how to enjoy life, not for the son of a mechanic. Other kids asked why he carried a club everywhere, why he stood for hours watching people hit balls, why he thought he could ever amount to anything in that rich man's game. Those questions weren't curious, they were cruel. Vijay quickly learned that some lives come pre-boxed. Poor means stay poor, ball picker means stay ball picker forever. But something burned inside him stronger than circumstance, stronger than shame. And his father Jit Singh, poor, powerless, and rarely gentle, was the first person to see it. Yet his love was the tough, quiet kind, sometimes brutal. He never said, "I'm proud of you," but he'd yell if Vijay's stance was off by an inch. He never hugged his son when the other kids mocked him. Instead, he made him practice until his arms went numb, because he knew life would be crueler than any playground bully. Jit Singh didn't teach his son to dream. He taught him to endure, to get up when knocked down, to understand that tears never made anyone a champion. And Vijay took it all in silence. That silence turned his childhood into one long scar. He never knew what praise felt like, never knew what protection felt like. He only knew that to escape poverty he had to grow up while he was still a child. In the afternoons, while the sun painted long shadows across the grass, rich kids laughed and played golf inside the fence. Vijay stood on the other side of the chain link, peering through the diamonds of steel. He wasn't allowed in because he had no money. He was only allowed to pick up balls in exchange for a few minutes of practice after everyone left. Some days when the course was empty, Vijay gathered the leftover balls, hands covered in dirt and sand, wondering, do I really belong here? Or am I just trying to force my way into a world that was never meant for me? That question followed him through his teenage years, a question that hurts to look back on when you see what genius he became. Because some people aren't born to win, they turn themselves into winners through pain. And Vijay Singh was one of them. The poor boy outside the fence that day had no idea the world would one day call him a legend. He only knew that if he didn't hit balls, if he didn't practice, if he didn't fight, life would never give him a place. And so in the fading twilight of a Fijian golf course, with the distant sound of ocean waves, a genius quietly began to form, silent, humble, and heartbreakingly alone. The loneliness of childhood had barely begun to heal when the next tragedy struck Vijay Singh like a sudden, merciless knife. In the early years of turning pro, when he still carried the fragile belief that hard work could save a life, fate chose that exact moment to snap the wings that had only just started to open. In 1985, Vijay was accused of altering his scorecard at a small Asian tournament, an accusation with no solid evidence, no real witnesses, but powerful enough to kill the career of a young man trying to escape poverty. With one cold ruling from the organizers, he was banned. No hearing. No one listened to his side. No one stood up for him. A careless rumor became absolute truth, and Vijay's voice was silenced as if it had never existed. In that moment, honor, the only possession a poor kid can carry for life, was ripped from his hands. Back in Fiji, the Singh family went numb when they heard. His father, the man who hid love beneath sternness, stood frozen so long his mother didn't dare speak. Vijay called home trying to keep his voice steady so his dad wouldn't hear the tremble, but every word caught in his throat. He was stripped of the right to play, branded a cheat, just as his career was blossoming. For a guy barely in his 20s, it wasn't just a career fall, it was a blow to the soul. Friends in golf turned away overnight. People who had shaken his hand, congratulated him, chatted on the range, suddenly treated him like he had the plague. They didn't want to be associated, didn't want to be near a liar. They say golf is a gentleman's game of honor and integrity. Yet in that very game, Vijay saw how easily honor can be trampled. No one asked for the truth. No one gave him a chance to defend himself. And the media swooped in like hungry crows, ready to tear his name apart. Papers said he cheated out of desperation. That his career was so mediocre, he had to fake scores. That a guy from Fiji had no future in international golf anyway, so of course he wasn't trustworthy. Those black words cut like knives. He read every article, every comment, every sneer, and inside him grew a cold silence no one on the golf scene could see. Some nights he couldn't sleep. Some nights he stared at his hands and wondered how life could turn so fast. I didn't do it, he told himself. But those words only echoed inside a cramped apartment. No one outside those four walls would listen. Vijay swore he would never forgive the humiliation, not the people who accused him, but the world that believed the lie so easily. The wound of 1985 didn't just shatter his budding career, it shattered his faith in people, in justice, in the naive idea that if you worked hard enough and stayed clean, the world would reward you fairly. Life taught him the first lesson all great ones learn: sometimes justice doesn't belong to the innocent. It belongs to whoever speaks loudest. The ban meant losing his only income, no tournaments, no place to grow his talent, and worst of all, no one who still believed in him. Vijay fell into paralysis. A young man with a burning dream watched it turn to ash in minutes, forced to watch his future vanish. He couldn't go home to Fiji. People would ask why he was banned. He couldn't stay, no one wanted him around. His only choice was to disappear from the golf map. And so quietly and in agony, he left Asia carrying a shame only he fully understood. People say a wound to honor hurts the most because it doesn't bleed yet eats you from the inside. For Vijay Singh, 1985 was that wound. A wound that at 62 he still carries, not as bitterness, but as a reminder the world is never kind to those born in the wrong place, with the wrong skin color, daring to dream dreams too big for their station. And that was only the first knife in a life full of cracks. When the last door in Asia slammed shut behind the wrongful accusation, Vijay had nowhere left to go, except a choice even he had never imagined. Nigeria, a foreign, poor, harsh land completely cut off from the golf world he once dreamed of entering. Far too young, instead of standing on tournament tees, he landed in a place where even the Fiji ocean breeze couldn't reach to comfort his broken heart. Life there wasn't the journey of an athlete on a break. It felt like exile for a crime Vijay never committed. His room in Nigeria was so small, he could touch both walls with arms outstretched. The ceiling was moldy. The smell of old paint and dampness choked him every morning. Every night before lying on the creaky bed he had to tap the frame to make sure it wouldn't collapse when he rolled over. One weak yellow bulb hung from the ceiling, bright enough to show the stains on the wall like a map of a youth drained of hope. He came to Nigeria not to play but to teach beginners, low-paying lonely work that had nothing to do with his dreams. But it was the only way to survive. Teaching golf to live while golf was the very thing reminding him his dream had been stolen. He stood under the brutal sun giving slow swing lessons, asking himself, "What am I doing here? Who have I become?" Many nights when Nigeria sank into darkness, when all he heard outside were insects and distant stray dogs, Vijay sat in front of the only tiny mirror in the room. He looked at his tired, gaunt face, eyes that had lost their fire, and asked the question he never thought he'd voice, "Am I actually the cheat they say I am?" Not because he believed it, but because the whole world seemed to. And when the whole world believes a lie, sometimes even the innocent start to doubt. He raged at the injustice but was also gripped by fear, fear that his career had died before it ever lived. In Nigeria he had no friends, no one to share the pain, no one who knew how big he had once dreamed or how close he had stood to the PGA Tour. No one saw the despair in his eyes. Every day was suffocatingly the same. Wake up in the damp room, put on shoes with worn-out soles, walk to the range, teach, collect a few coins, go back, and sink into endless nothingness. The future, the thing young people usually clutch tight, was for Vijay just a faint shadow he could never catch. But even on the darkest nights something never left him: golf. No stages, no crowds, no chances left, yet golf still lived in his hands like the only friend who stayed. In the evenings after work he quietly went behind the range to a small patch of ground with little light. There he hit balls alone. No cheers, no audience, no one cared. But every strike in that darkness was a final declaration that he was still alive. He swung as if fighting fate itself, daring the world, "You can take my honor, but you can't take my will." And in those lonely nights, Vijay began to understand that his dream would not die unless he let it die. Nigeria was where his dream was buried, but also where it quietly came back to life. One day, watching his students hit balls in the afternoon sun, he realized the truth he would later repeat in rare interviews: "Golf never abandoned me, even when the whole world did." From that painful truth a new will was forged, the will of a man with nothing left to lose and therefore capable of winning everything. Nigeria wasn't just where his dream nearly died, it was where he learned to fight alone, without applause, without lights, without belief or expectation from anyone. Just him and a fragile hope. One day he would return, not for revenge, but to prove the world had judged him wrong. And that alone saved Vijay Singh from the abyss 1985 had thrown him into. Leaving Nigeria, Vijay didn't go home to Fiji or back to Asia, where his name was still blackened beyond repair. Instead he went to South Africa, a land that was both more promising and more brutal, where professional golf was growing but invisible barriers and discrimination hung thick as fog. He went there not by choice, but because it was the only door still cracked open for someone carrying the stain the world had painted on him. Yet even stepping onto Cape Town soil, Vijay knew this wasn't salvation, it was just the next chapter of trial. South Africa was still a deeply divided society, and in golf, Players who weren't white, weren't American, Australian or European, were often met with looks that lacked respect. Vijay, a man from Fiji, a tiny island many couldn't place on a map, had no rich country behind him, no tours to defend his honor, no media machine to speak his name. He was a lone figure walking into a world that had already drawn its lines, a world where friendly smiles sometimes only hid suspicion and pride. Every small tournament he entered he paid for himself. Hotel, travel, carrying his own clubs to the range. No entourage, no support staff, no sponsors waiting with open arms. And the deepest pain wasn't the lack of money, it was the looks from people on the grass that said, "You don't belong here." But strangely, in this foreign place, a new seed began to stir in his heart. On the South African Sunshine Tour, small as it was, Vijay got something Nigeria couldn't give him: opportunity. The chance to stand on a tee box and hit balls as a real competitor again. The chance to feel the thrill of competition. The chance to prove the 1985 stain didn't define him. And he seized that chance with all the pain, anger, shame and quiet power his years of exile had forged inside him. But the price was brutal. Vijay's practice wasn't like anyone else's. Most players practiced 2, maybe 3 hours. He practiced 8, sometimes 10. People said he trained like it was the only thing keeping him from sinking. His arms swelled, hands cracked, fingernails torn and bleeding. He repeated wedges until blood seeped through the tape on his fingers. When the wind hit those cuts, it burned so badly he had to bite his lip until it bled just to keep swinging. But he didn't stop. He couldn't stop. Golf was the only thing that had stayed when the world walked away. Golf was the only thing that never betrayed him. Golf was the last thin thread of hope. Other golfers watched him practice with both awe and pity. They wondered how a band player with no backing, unknown, could carry that kind of fire. But they didn't know that behind every swing was the terror of being forgotten, the unhealed wound of honor, the obsession to prove he was clean, the fear that if he didn't practice enough today, tomorrow he would vanish from golf as if he had never existed. In his first South African tournaments, Vijay didn't win. He barely got noticed, but he improved. And after every round, as the sun dropped behind the mountains, he went back to the range alone, in silence. Others went to dinner. He stayed under the yellow lights hitting balls until the course staff begged him to stop because they needed to lock up. At night he returned to his simple rented room, no one to talk to, no family waiting, no laughter, just him and questions he couldn't answer. Where do I really belong? Will life ever accept me, or am I just clinging to a dream that was never meant for me? South Africa didn't help him forget the wound of 1985. On the contrary, it made it throb more because even though he had left Asia, the shadow of that accusation still lurked in the eyes of people he met. But South Africa was also where he realized that sometimes we aren't born to belong anywhere, we have to carve our own place. And for Vijay Singh, that didn't come from favor, resources or luck, it came from blood, pain, and a stubbornness no one could match. He didn't belong to this world yet, but he was slowly forcing open a door the world couldn't keep closed forever, and he knew this painful journey was only just beginning. Leaving South Africa with a few saved dollars, an old suitcase, and hands calloused until they bled, Vijay Singh stepped into the next chapter, the one he would later call the longest and loneliest stretch of my life. The European tour sounds glamorous with its famous courses, ancient cities, and packed galleries. But for someone like Vijay, no country backing him, no reputation, no one in his corner, it wasn't paradise. It was a spiritual desert, a place only the most stubborn or desperate could survive. For most golfers, Europe was a stepping stone. For Vijay, it was a place to stay alive. From the very first days on the European tour, he knew this wouldn't be easy. The money he had was enough for a few weeks of rent, but not for decent rooms, just cheap hotels with hard beds and walls so thin he could hear the neighbor cough. Vijay slept with the windows shut to block traffic noise, and also because he was afraid the cold air would make his already aching back and shoulders worse after endless practice sessions. Food, no fancy restaurants, no athlete meal plans. Most days he lived on cheap convenience store sandwiches. Some days, to save money, he'd cut one sandwich in half and keep the other half for dinner. There were times he had to choose between paying for a rental car or buying a hot meal. Usually he chose the car, because if he couldn't get to the range, everything else got worse. He became a ghost drifting from country to country, Scotland, Germany, Spain, Portugal, Sweden, with an old golf bag, shoes falling apart at the edges, and the faint hope that maybe this week will be better. But it almost never was. The European Tour didn't welcome him with open arms. He lost far more than he won. That was the reality. Vijay knew it, but no one else understood what it really cost him. Every missed cut meant losing money. Every finish outside the top meant he was pushed closer to the financial edge. Every bad round meant another sleepless night staring at the ceiling of a cheap hotel room. The same question from 1985 spinning in his head. Do I really not belong in this world? He played with fear as his constant companion. Not fear of opponents, fear of hunger, fear of not having enough for next week, fear that there would be no more chances. It wasn't the fear of someone playing to win, it was the fear of someone playing to live. In that world, his first European Tour wins, the ones outsiders thought would feel like a rebirth, were actually just exhausted breaths from a survivor. When Vijay won the Nigerian Open, and then the Malaysian PGA Championship, the media barely noticed. No one wrote glowing stories. No one called him a talent. No one said his career was back. To the world, those wins were small, forgettable, insignificant. But to Vijay they weren't victories. They were proof he wasn't dead yet, proof he still had a chance to rebuild a life. Yet ironically, even when he won, he didn't feel joy. He stood holding the trophy with a faint smile, heart empty, because those wins didn't erase the old wounds. They didn't erase 1985. They didn't erase the condescending looks from other players. They didn't erase the loneliness that still followed him like a shadow. On every European course, Vijay was the stranger. No one really talked to him. No one checked on him. No one invited him to dinner after a round. He heard them laughing, discussing strategy, planning schedules, but he was never included. He stood on the edge of conversations like an invisible man, and when they looked at him, he knew they didn't see a competitor. They only saw the guy banned in 1985, an invisible label, heavy, suffocating. It made him feel that no matter what he did, no matter how much he won, no matter how well he played, the past always walked one step ahead of him. And a shame he never earned, still decided his life. No course fully accepted him. No place called him by his real name. No one gave him the chance to be seen as a new man. But he kept going. Week after week, year after year, he practiced until his hands bled. He stood in rain, wind, bone-cutting European cold. He played with a body in pain, a mind exhausted, a heart forever pulled back by the ghosts of the past. The European Tour years are the ones almost no one remembers. No reporters wrote books about that period. No fans retell the stories. No highlights live in anyone's memory. But Vijay remembers everything. Every course, every gust of wind, every shot, every hungry night, every moldy cheap hotel smell, every time he turned off the light with tears, because he felt his life slipping away for nothing. And those years, the ones no one cared about, no one saw, no one praised, forged the will that later made him world number one. The European Tour wasn't where he found himself. It was where he learned to endure the deepest loneliness of a man fighting his whole life to reclaim a stolen honor. And even at 62, walking into dawn practice sessions, that pain is still there. It hasn't faded. It hasn't blurred. It has never completely gone away. Because some chapters in life aren't born to be victories. They're born to remind us that sometimes, to reach the top, we have to walk roads no one remembers, but we never forget. When the lonely European Tour years finally forged him into an iron warrior, Vijay Singh stepped into the biggest chapter of his life, the PGA Tour, the place where golf dreams are defined, where legends are made, and where the weak are crushed without mercy. But for Vijay, it wasn't the paradise every golfer dreams of. It was a battlefield he had to enter with calloused hands, a scarred heart, and a past the world still viewed through a warped lens. When Vijay arrived on the PGA Tour, no one clapped. There was no curiosity, no excitement, No fairy tale story was built around him, just silence. A cold silence that matched the armor he had to wear to survive. On the PGA Tour, players don't just play golf, they sell an image, chat with fans, smile in interviews, build personal brands, create likability. Vijay, he did none of that. He didn't try to fit in, he didn't chat in the locker room, he didn't smile for the press, he didn't court fans. He showed up to the range before everyone and left after everyone was gone. He spoke only when he had to, answered only when asked, and kept an invisible wall that made others unsure how to approach him. They started labeling him difficult, cold, arrogant, unfriendly. But no one understood it was the armor of a man the whole world once turned its back on. No one knew how much humiliation he had paid to stand here. No one knew he had stood alone in the dark for years. No one knew he had practiced until blood soaked the tape on his hands, just to earn the right to step on these courses. People saw the exterior, quiet, closed off, serious, and thought that was his personality. But Vijay knew it was survival. It was how he protected his heart from one more wound. While young golfers laughed, signed autographs, posed for photos, and charmed reporters, he stood on the sidelines silently adjusting clubs, tweaking grips, perfecting stance, repeating motions he had done millions of times. When asked why he didn't try to fit in, why he didn't build a friendlier image, he gave one simple answer: "I'm here to survive, not to make anyone happy." That sentence summed up his entire journey, the journey of a man not born into favor, not welcomed like American talents, not protected by big organizations, a man who could only live by effort and his own blood and bone. And then, after years of being dismissed, misjudged, treated like an outsider, the defining moment came, the 1998 PGA Championship, a monumental win, a win that made him a major champion, a win that proved everyone who ever doubted him was dead wrong. But what the world didn't see was that the moment he stood on the trophy podium under flashing cameras and roaring crowds, he broke down in tears, not from joy, from regret, because his parents, the two people who saw the dream in their son when he was still swinging a broken club in Fiji, were not there to witness the greatest moment of his life. They weren't in the stands, they didn't watch live, they never got to hug him after the win. They never saw the poor ball-picker boy lift the biggest trophy of his life. Vijay stood alone, hands trembling slightly, looking up at the sky, as if sending that victory to the two people who had always stood behind him, even if they couldn't be beside him in the moment that mattered most. "I wish they could see this," he said through tears. Words no microphone caught, but the truest he ever spoke in his career. 2 years later, in 2000, Vijay entered the tournament every golfer dreams of, the Masters, the stage of legends, where only the strongest souls leave a mark at Augusta National, and he did the seemingly impossible. He won. While America celebrated Tiger Woods, while the media focused on young faces, Vijay, the man who had been exiled, who had lived through years of being misunderstood, quietly stood on the winner's podium of the most prestigious tournament in the world. When reporters asked how he felt, he didn't talk about himself. He didn't talk about the brutal journey. He didn't mention the hatred from 1985. He said one sentence that silenced the room: "I just wish my father could see this." No beaming smile, no proud head held high, just a son missing his dad. A son wanting to prove to the man who forged him that all the pain, all the sweat, all the wounds had meant something. But fate is cruel. His father never lived to see Vijay at the top of the world. He carried that grief for the rest of his life. And the bitterest part, even after winning the Masters, even after becoming one of the greatest golfers of his era, American fans never loved him. They respected the talent, but they didn't love the man. The media called him a warrior, but never an icon. His peers feared his work ethic, but never befriended him. He remained the outsider, still the loner on the edge of the locker room. Still the man the world looked at with lingering suspicion because the ghost of 1985 still hid somewhere in their minds. But for Vijay Singh, that no longer mattered. He didn't come to the PGA Tour to be loved. He came to prove the world had judged him wrong, to reclaim the honor that was stolen, to rewrite a story that seemed sealed when he was 22 years old. And every swing he took on the PGA Tour, Powerful, cold, precise, was a reminder no one has the right to bury a man while he is still fighting. And Vijay Singh was still fighting, against prejudice, against loneliness, against a world that never truly opened its arms to him, but he stood there, at the peak of glory, by his own strength, and that was the greatest victory of all. 2004, the year the entire world calls Vijay Singh's legendary year, did not begin with cheers, did not begin with confidence, and certainly did not begin with a healthy body as people assume. It began with pain, with mornings where he had to push against the bed frame just to stand up, with steps so heavy his legs felt decades older than they were. But no one saw that. People only saw the wins, only saw the records, only saw a man who surpassed Tiger Woods to climb to the throne of world golf. The truth was darker, cruelly so. Vijay's body was breaking down day by day. His spine felt like it was about to snap. Every morning when he opened his eyes, he had to sit motionless for minutes waiting for the pain in his back to ease. He turned slowly, as if peeling pieces of glass out of his flesh. No one knew that sometimes he had to lie face down on the hotel room floor, breathing shallowly because the back pain was so intense he couldn't stand. His knees were swollen like two balls, red, hot, tight, and painful. The first steps of the day felt more like punishment than movement. Yet just hours later he would walk onto the course, face calm, back straight, no sign that his body was screaming. In 2004, Vijay won 9 PGA Tour events, a modern-era record even the giants like Tiger Woods have never touched. But no one knew that after each victory, he quietly went back to the treatment room where therapists worked on him for hours. No one knew that on many nights he didn't dare remove the knee wraps because he was afraid to see how bad the swelling really was. No one knew that even when the media crowned him world number one, he still trembled from pain when bending down to tie his shoes. And the cruelest part was the nights alone. Nights he sat motionless in a dark room with only the hum of the air conditioner and faint hallway light leaking in. He rubbed his own back, rubbed his own knees, closed his eyes and tried to swallow the sobs. Some nights he cried, not from sadness or defeat, but from the brutal truth. His body could not take much more. But that pain had no audience. No one heard it. No one saw that to lift a trophy high he paid with sleepless nights. No one knew that to walk to the green with the calm coolness the world praised, he had to take double doses of painkillers. The media called him a machine, emotionless, inhuman in his practice. They weren't wrong, but they weren't right either. Vijay wasn't a machine, he was a human being fighting his own body. Players in the locker room sometimes saw him quietly icing his back, face expressionless. They thought he was cold. The truth was he was in too much pain to talk. There was even a time he had to ask a range attendant to help pull him to his feet, because his back locked up so badly he couldn't stand on his own. But when he stepped onto the course, he stood tall like nothing had happened. And he won, and won again, and kept winning. Those victories weren't built on confidence. They weren't built on talent alone. They were built on physical sacrifice, on pain, on tears, on a will that refused to break even when the body had broken long ago. After he passed Tiger and became world number one, people asked how he felt. He gave a faint smile and said, "I'm just doing my job." But the truth was he had paid with his personal life, with his health, with whatever youth he had left. In every round he felt his body trying to betray him, but his mind refused. His mind said, "This glory doesn't come easy, take it, even if it hurts, even if it breaks you, even if there's nothing left." When he became world number one, the entire PGA Tour feared and respected him, but not many truly understood him. No one knew that the year he reached his absolute peak was also the year he came closest to total collapse. The year doctors told him, "If you keep going like this, you won't walk normally when you're older." Vijay just smiled. "I've never walked normally," he said. To him pain wasn't the enemy. It was his companion, proof he was still fighting, still living, still existing. 2004 was the legendary year, but it was also the year his body officially began to fall apart. And while the world celebrated him, while fans called him a monument, while trophies kept coming, he knew a truth no one else did. If he stopped for one single day, everything would disappear. so he kept fighting the pain, kept practicing, kept hitting balls until his hands bled, kept stepping to the tee with a back that felt like it was being stabbed. Because he understood something the world never did. Legends aren't born from talent. Legends are born from bodies that are breaking but still keep walking. And 2004, the year the world calls the year of the legend, was the year Vijay Singh understood best the price of glory. What the world saw was victory. What he remembers for the rest of his life are the nights sitting in the dark, rubbing his back, crying from pain, then getting up the next morning and fighting again, because that was the only road he knew, and because he had no other choice but to become immortal. Even though 2004 took Vijay Singh to the absolute pinnacle every golfer craves, that light never reached the house where his wife and son waited in years of loneliness. Paradoxically, his success became the shadow that blocked out family happiness, something he never had the chance to build properly. And in the years after the peak, Vijay realized more and more, sometimes success isn't the reward, it's the price. His wife Ardena was the one who walked with him through the darkest days, from Fiji to Nigeria to South Africa to Europe to America. She stayed not for money or fame, because when they fell in love Vijay had nothing but an old golf bag and a dream full of wounds. She was the only one who didn't abandon him in 1985, when the whole world turned away. She was the one who changed the bandages when he practiced until his hands bled. She was the one who stood behind every loss, every night of despair, every time he doubted himself. But the price of loving a man obsessed with survival, with stolen honor, with the need to practice without end, was loneliness. While Vijay traveled the world for months at a time, Ardena stayed home alone with their young son. Dinners were just mother and child. Birthdays were just mother and child. Holidays were just mother and child. And sometimes even when Vijay was physically home, his body was too exhausted to talk, too sore to play, too stressed to live like a normal person. Their son Quas grew up without a father for most of his childhood. Vijay loved his son, but love didn't make up for absence. He thought the victories would give his boy a better life, a safer future, but children don't care about trophies, they care about presence, and Vijay wasn't present. The obsession with surviving on the PGA Tour made him miss every milestone. Quas's first day of school, his first soccer game, the first time he got hurt, the first time he read a word, his 5th birthday, 6th birthday, 7th birthday, a long chain of moments he could never get back. He only realized it one evening, when he came home from a tournament, too tired to even take off his shoes, and Quas, only 8 years old, stood in front of him, looked up with big round eyes and said a sentence that shattered his father's heart. "I know you love golf more than me." It wasn't said like an accusation, it sounded like a fact the child had already accepted, but to Vijay it was a knife straight into the deepest part of his soul. Even at 62, he still remembers the exact tone of that sentence, still hears it on sleepless nights, still asks himself why he couldn't be both a champion and a proper father. He once whispered to his only close friend, "I won the world, but I lost my own family," and that is the truth outsiders will never understand. While the media only sees a successful, disciplined, wealthy, iron-willed man, they never see behind the doors of his home, where a lonely woman raises a child alone, where a little boy stares out the window waiting for his dad to come back, where a man sits in a dark room knowing his success didn't come free. He fought his whole life so the world wouldn't misunderstand him, yet he let his own family misunderstand him. He reclaimed his honor from the game of golf, but he never reclaimed the time he lost. He built a career with pain and blood, but he lost the moments that should have been the warmest. To many, Vijay Singh is known as the coldest man on the PGA Tour, but to those who have seen him fall apart in silence, they know that coldness comes from a heart that has taken too much damage. Damage so deep he no longer knows how to love without sacrificing himself. Every victory he brought home made his family proud, but every victory also pushed them further apart. Every trophy was proof of talent, but also proof of absence. Every phone call home began with the words, "I'm sorry, but apologies never mend the cracks in a child's heart." And the greatest pain, Even when Quas grew up, Vijay still wasn't sure his son had forgiven him. He didn't know if he had done the right thing. Didn't know if the glory of 2004 was worth it. Didn't know if the trophies were worth trading for every year of his child's childhood he missed. He only knew one thing. His loneliness didn't just come from a poor childhood, from the humiliation of 1985, from the years in exile. It also came from the very success he bled to achieve. And on those long nights when back pain forced him to sit gasping on the edge of the bed, he always remembered that small sentence from Quas, the sentence he carries like a scar that never heals. I know you love golf more than me. No victory ever erased those words. No honor ever lightened that guilt. No glory ever healed the pain of a father who knows he traded too much. And that is the silent tragedy of Vijay Singh, the man who has everything except complete happiness. The silent family tragedy had barely begun to heal when another blow, just as cruel as 1985, crashed down on Vijay Singh's life, this time when he was over 50, already a legend, having paid with his entire life to erase the cheater label. But fate can be so vicious it forces a man to relive old pain like a sick joke. In 2013, while Vijay was trying to extend his career on the PGA Tour, a nightmare struck out of nowhere, the deer antler spray scandal, a product he innocently used without knowing it was on a banned list that was still unclear and being updated at the time. One article appeared, then another, then a media storm. The PGA Tour launched an investigation, and overnight the name Vijay Singh, the man who had once stood at the very top of world golf, became public enemy number one again. People didn't call him major champion, didn't call him world number one, didn't call him a legend. They called him exactly what he had spent his life trying to erase: cheater. The cheater is back. 1985 all over again. Vijay couldn't believe his eyes when he read those words. It felt like someone had dug up the grave of his past and thrown the humiliation back in his face. That night he sat alone in a small San Diego hotel room, the yellow light falling across a face lined with time and pressure. Behind him on the bed lay the golf bag already packed for tomorrow's round, but he no longer had the strength to stand. He opened his laptop and read every article. Every headline was a knife. Every comment was a punch. Every mocking name tore another strip from his heart. And the worst part? It wasn't the accusations. It was the familiar haunting poisonous feeling of 1985. He whispered into the darkness. Again, after everything they still see me as a cheater. His heart cracked open again right along the old fault line. No one wanted to hear him explain that what he used wasn't performance enhancing, had no proven effect on the human body, and that he had taken it only as a commercial recovery product like hundreds of other athletes. Society didn't need the truth. Society needed a villain. After years of cheering his name as an immortal warrior, now they needed a criminal to point at, to condemn, to judge. Vijay understood it. He understood because he had lived it once before, but understanding didn't make it hurt any less. In those suffocating days, the PGA Tour treated him like a suspect, a threat to the integrity of the sport. They investigated, they called him in for tense interrogations, and every time the door closed, Vijay felt 22 years old again, sitting in front of Asian officials, convicted before he could speak. All those years trying to rebuild his honor, and one baseless rumor was enough to destroy it all. He looked in the hotel mirror, eyes bloodshot. What did I do to deserve this for the rest of my life? But this time, Vijay didn't stay silent, didn't run, didn't hide in the dark like 1985, didn't walk away from the world that hurt him. He stood up, he fought back. He sued the PGA Tour. It wasn't a lawsuit for money, it wasn't for fame, it was a lawsuit for his life, for the right to live without being haunted by false accusations, for the right to be respected as a human being who had paid with blood, tears, and decades of pain. The legal battle was long, draining, exhausting, and many times in courthouse hallways, Vijay wondered if he had the strength to keep fighting, but every time he signed another legal document, he remembered one sentence: I know you love golf more than me. Quas's words, soaked in pain, made him realize that if he didn't defend his honor, he would have nothing left to give his son except shame. In the end, Vijay won the case. The PGA Tour dropped the charges. He was declared clean. But that victory came with no prize money, no trophy, no applause, just a man standing in a hotel room, feeling his heart stitched back together with rough thread, leaving a scar bigger than he ever imagined. He didn't smile, he didn't celebrate, he didn't call anyone to brag, because Vijay knew, wounds to honor never fully heal. 1985 and 2013, two knife wounds, 28 years apart, struck the exact same spot, his faith in the world. If his body broke in 2004, his heart broke again in 2013, and that is the tragedy of Vijay Singh, a man who has to fight his whole life, not just to win at golf, but to beat prejudice, to beat suspicion, to beat a past that others invented for him. And even though he won in court, deep inside he knows he will never escape the haunting question, why do they never believe me? After the 2013 nightmare, many thought Vijay would slowly fade, that in his 50s, after decades of being misunderstood, hurt, and betrayed by his own body, he would choose the path of retreat, but they forgot that Vijay Singh is the man who was never allowed to be weak. His entire life, from Fiji to Nigeria, from South Africa to Europe, from the PGA Tour to the courtroom, his existence has always been tied to two things, pain and work, and he has never been able to separate them. In the years past 50, his body rebelled harder than ever. His back, the tormentor since the 1990s, became a life sentence. Worn discs, muscles that screamed, nerves sometimes stretched like they were about to snap. Every morning he woke up pushing both hands against the bed frame, inching forward, breathing deep to endure the pain shooting down his spine like 1,000 needles in the bone. Some days he couldn't bend to tie his shoes. Some days he had to take tiny slow steps because his knees were swollen tight, as if they carried the weight of his whole weary life. Yet just a few hours later he was on the range, no complaining, no whining, no excuses. Because for him, pain is not a reason to stop, it is the reason to keep going. His caddy once said, there were days just watching Vijay stand up looked agonizing, yet hours later he was hitting balls with the speed of a man 30 years younger. Every swing felt like a knife, shoulders tight, back stabbing, knees ready to buckle, yet he kept swinging, hundreds of balls, thousands of balls, day after day. At an age when most golfers only show up for occasional pro-ams, Vijay still practiced 5 to 7 hours a day, sometimes more. People asked, what more do you need? You've won majors, been world number one, you're a legend. He answered with one sentence that sent chills down the spine. If I stop practicing, I'll die inside. It wasn't poetic, it was the truth. Golf isn't just his job, it is the only anchor keeping him afloat in a life full of storms. It is what got him up after 1985, what let him survive Nigeria, what kept him going in Europe, what carried him through the PGA Tour, what helped him endure the pain of 2004, and what pulled him through the humiliation of 2013. Without golf, he knows his heart would be so empty, he couldn't go on living, but the price his body pays grows more terrible every year. Some practice sessions he has to stop midway because his wrists go numb like electric shocks. Some afternoons his left leg can barely hold his weight. Sometimes he can't turn fully, and has to change his technique just to keep his body from breaking again. Yet the next morning, before the sky is fully light, he walks into the gym, back slightly bent, face tight with pain, but eyes still sharp, still determined. He no longer practices to return to his peak. He practices because it's the only way to keep living without being swallowed by painful memories, injustice, and the loneliness that has followed him his whole life. At 55, when many said he should rest, Vijay played more events than most young golfers. At 58, when doctors warned his back muscles were thinning dangerously, he just nodded and went back to the range. At 60, he could still hit 500 wedges in an afternoon, a number that made even young athletes shake their heads in disbelief. His health declines, but his spirit never wavers. Vijay Singh has lived a life where pain has never left him, but he is also the man who has never abandoned effort. He doesn't try to escape age or pain, he faces them head on, and in doing so, He makes 50, 55, 60 meaningless numbers in the face of his will. Pain makes most people fall. For Vijay, pain is the reason he keeps standing tall. He no longer fights to be praised, no longer fights for more titles, no longer fights to prove anything to the world. He fights because it is the only thing he knows how to do to keep himself from falling apart. In every slower swing, every harder step, every longer practice session lies a truth only he understands. A man can be brought down by life, but if his heart still wants to fight, life cannot kill him. Vijay Singh, well past 60, is no longer a legend in everyone's eyes, but in the quiet eyes of those who watch him practice, who watch him painfully stand up again, who watch him defy every crack time puts in him, he is a symbol of mental strength the sporting world rarely sees. He is the man who is always in pain, but has never stopped. The years on the Champions Tour, where older golfers usually rediscovered joy, relaxation, and gentle laughter, became yet another chapter in Vijay Singh's silent war against time. For many, the Champions Tour is a second career, a place to play golf without the suffocating pressure of the PGA Tour. But for Vijay, the Champions Tour is not the old man's playground, it is the final battlefield, the place he keeps fighting, not for titles, but to claim every minute he can still live as a man who has not surrendered to fate. He no longer wins much, no longer dominates, no longer breaks records like 2004, but the remarkable thing is, he still plays, still arrives at the course while the dew is thick, still practices longer before rounds than most young golfers, still patiently measures every putt, refines every wedge, works on every driver as if he were preparing for a major. Fans see a man in his 50s and 60s still playing well, still bombing it, still carrying that ice-cold precision on approach shots to the green. They think he has conquered the pain, that after all these years his body has adapted. But the truth is far crueler. After every round, Vijay Singh has to lie perfectly still for up to 20 minutes, because his back locks up so badly he can't stand. Many fellow players have seen him walk into the physio room ghost white, sweat pouring down even in cold weather. His body trembles slightly every time the therapist presses on his lower back and hips. The pain never leaves, it just sleeps while the adrenaline of competition is flowing. The second the round ends, it comes roaring back, like a predator that patiently waits for the exact moment he's weakest. One Champions Tour staff member once said he saw Vijay slumped in the locker room after a round, hand clutching his back, eyes squeezed shut. "Give me a minute, just a minute." His voice was hoarse, but there wasn't a hint of asking permission. It was the voice of a warrior refusing to collapse. For some, the Champions Tour is a place to enjoy their love of golf, without performance pressure. For Vijay, it's not enjoyment, it's survival. If the PGA Tour was where he fought to prove he wasn't a cheater, the Champions Tour is where he fights to prove he still exists. When asked why he keeps competing with a body that broken, Vijay just gives a smile, more sad than happy, and says, "Golf keeps my soul together. If I stop playing, I disappear." To many people that sounds like a metaphor. To Vijay, it's the raw truth of his life. He never had a place he truly belonged. Not Fiji, not Nigeria, not South Africa, not Europe, not even the PGA Tour. The golf world never gave him the acceptance Tiger got, Phil got, Ernie Els got. He was always the guy standing outside the door, picking the lock himself, walking in himself, surviving himself. But there is one place that has never abandoned him, the golf club. It is the only thing that never doubted him, never accused him, never misunderstood him, never walked away when his body broke, when his spirit cracked, when the whole world treated him like an exception. Golf isn't a career, it isn't a way to make a living, it isn't a game. Golf is Vijay Singh's soul. The Champions Tour therefore became the place he keeps that soul from shattering. Not for titles, not for money, not for recognition he knows he'll never get. He plays to keep breathing. He practices to keep his heart from rotting. He grips the club so he isn't swallowed by 50 years of accumulated pain. Some afternoons, after finishing 18 holes to polite applause, Vijay heads straight to the range. He hits another 200 wedges, then 300 putts, then stands watching the sun go down, his shadow long on the grass, back slightly hunched from pain. Younger players don't understand why he still does it. Older players worry he's torturing himself, but no one understands that pain cannot kill Vijay Singh. Stopping work is what would kill him. One reporter once asked him, "Have you thought about retirement?" He stared into the distance, face blank, and answered, "I've fought my whole life for the right to stand on this golf course. I won't leave until my body can't lift the club anymore." That wasn't defiance. It was confession. Constant fighting is the only way Vijay knows how to exist. The Champions Tour isn't where he recaptures glory. It's where he learns to accept age, accept pain, accept that the world may never understand him, accept loneliness as part of life. But accepting is not surrendering. Vijay Singh has never surrendered to anything. He never bowed to the 1985 accusation, never bowed to the pain of 2004, never bowed to the humiliation of 2013, and he will not bow to time. As 60 came and went, every turn made him breathe harder, every night required ice to control the pain, yet Vijay still stepped to the tee the next morning, head high, as if his body had never cracked. Because for him the scariest thing isn't old age, it isn't pain, it isn't the cruelty of the past. The scariest thing is the silence. If one day he can no longer hear the sound of a ball being struck, golf keeps his soul intact, and he will play no matter how much it hurts, until his last breath. At 62, when many legends have moved on to broadcasting booths, opened academies, or are enjoying quiet retirement with family, Vijay Singh has begun a new war. One no stage sees, no crowd cheers for, no trophy can soothe. A war against his own body. After more than 4 decades of forcing himself beyond human limits, his body now carries the scars like a living diary. Every bone, every muscle, every vertebra records a battle he never allowed himself to quit. And at 62, the bill has come due without mercy. His back, the tormentor of half his life, is now severely degenerated. The discs are worn so thin every step creates a small silent scream inside him. Some mornings he can't stand upright. He has to brace both hands on the bathroom sink for minutes just to pull himself vertical. His legs, especially the left, throb with a constant ache like someone is yanking the nerve from hip to heel. Sharp, burning pain runs from lower back to calf, keeping him awake most nights. Many nights he only manages an hour of sleep before waking with a stifled groan. Insomnia has become an uninvited guest. At 2 a.m. some nights, he sits by the window, face reflected in the streetlight, eyes red from no sleep. It's not that he doesn't want to sleep, his body simply won't let him. Doctors look at his MRIs and shake their heads. You should quit golf. You need surgery. Your back can't take any more. They don't say it coldly, they say it out of worry. But no matter the tone, it still feels like a death sentence to a man whose life only has meaning when he can still hold a club. And Vijay just stays quiet, because deep down he knows the day he has to walk away from golf is the day his soul starts dying. So every morning, before the sun, while the world sleeps, while the house is nothing but wind and the rustle of his jacket, Vijay gets up. He slips on shoes worn through at the soles, throws on an old hoodie, and walks to the range, alone. No audience, no media, no one witnessing this persistence. He arrives at 4:30. Sometimes the grounds crew see his silhouette, back a little bent, steps slow, but eyes still sharp. He hits his first wedge before the sun peaks over the horizon. Every swing is a negotiation with pain. Every turn is a reminder of age. But he doesn't stop, because if he stops, he disappears. When practice is over, he often sits on the grass, hands on his knees, breathing slow, as if coaxing his heart back to a normal rhythm. Sometimes he leans forward, palms on the ground, like a man thanking life for one more day even if it hurts. Though the pain grows heavier each year, his will grows stronger each year. One afternoon, when Quas was grown, father and son stood together on an empty range. Quas watched his father practice with worried eyes, unable to understand why, at this age, he still had to hit hundreds of balls every day, not because he had to compete, not because he had to prove anything to anyone. In that silence Quas asked the question he had carried for years. "Dad, how much longer are you going to keep playing golf? Vijay set the club down, wincing from a stab in his hip, and looked at his son. In that moment the hard shell cracked, revealing a heart covered in scars. He answered softly, but with his whole soul in the words, "I'm not afraid of dying, I'm only afraid of the day I can't hold a club anymore." Quas said nothing more, but he stepped forward, and put a hand on his father's shoulder. For the first time in years, Vijay realized he didn't have to fight alone. That moment brings tears to anyone who hears it. A man so strong the world thought nothing could break him, is terrified of the simplest thing, losing the one thing that has kept him alive his entire life. At 62, as his body slowly runs out of strength, Vijay Singh is no longer fighting to be number one, he is fighting to keep living with meaning. People see him on the Champions Tour and think he's fine. They see him smile, and think he's happy. They see beautiful shots, and think the pain is gone. The truth is the complete opposite. He hurts more than ever, he sleeps less than ever, he practices more than ever, he stays silent more than ever. Because he knows he walks a road few understand. The road of a man who has been through hell many times and still refuses to be defeated. What happened to Vijay Singh at 62? He hurts, he's exhausted, he barely sleeps, his body is cracking. Doctors tell him to stop, but he does not surrender, never. And that is why American fans, once they know the full truth, will feel a lump in their throat and be unable to speak, because sometimes the most tragic thing about a legend's life isn't when they win. It's when they keep getting up to fight, even though they know they're slowly losing to time. At 62, when Vijay Singh still quietly stands on the range at dawn, his shadow long across the dew-wet grass, people finally start to realize the world never truly understood him. For 4 decades, America watched him win, beat Tiger Woods, dominate 2004, become the symbol of durability. But America never saw, or perhaps never wanted to see, the pain he carried in every breath. In a world that celebrates beloved heroes, Vijay Singh became a rare kind of legend, the winner who was never embraced like Tiger, never cheered like Phil Mickelson, never treated as a national icon. Tiger is loved, Mickelson is worshipped. American legends are greeted with fireworks, praise and unconditional respect. Vijay, he was given a different title, the most misunderstood man in modern golf history. But there is one truth the world cannot deny: no one, absolutely no one, has ever worked harder than Vijay Singh. From hands bleeding from thousands of swings in South Africa, from cold cheap sandwiches in Europe, from mornings in Fiji, when he didn't even have shoes, to nights in America, when he couldn't stand up from pain, he never once asked for pity, not once. Vijay never demanded love, never demanded recognition, never demanded anyone stand with him. He just stood there, held the club, and practiced until his body gave out. In a world full of athletes begging for attention, he only asked for the right to exist, to compete, to work, to live as himself. But what makes Vijay's story greater than any other legend is the journey of his life, a journey too painfully beautiful to ignore. From poor Fiji, where a barefoot boy stood outside the fence watching rich kids play, where the dream began with a broken club, to 1985, when the world stole his honor with a baseless accusation, banned him, crushed a career before it could bloom, to the exile years, living in moldy rooms in Nigeria, asking the mirror every night if he really was the cheat the world said he was, to Europe, sleeping in cheap hotels, eating cheap sandwiches, playing more for survival than for dreams, to the PGA Tour, where he was never loved, never welcomed like the Americans, never hugged like Tiger, yet quietly became one of the greatest players in history, to 2004, when he passed Tiger to become world number 1, but paid with a body almost destroyed, to 2013, when he was accused again and the world called him cheater, once more, as if 28 years wasn't long enough to forgive a wound he never caused, to vindication, when he won the lawsuit, but his heart was torn open again, and finally to 62, when doctors tell him to quit golf, but he tells his son, "I'm not afraid of dying, I'm only afraid of the day I can't hold a club anymore." If there is one life that deserves to be told in an epic voice, it is the life of Vijay Singh, a life full of falls, yet every fall made him rise stronger, harder, more stubborn. Vijay is the clearest proof of the truth. Not every great man is loved. Legends are not always the ones cheered, worshipped, wrapped in admiration. Some legends are born to walk through life in silence, to fight in the dark, to endure what others cannot. But in those legends, especially the misunderstood ones, lies a quality America needs to learn. Strength is not in the applause, but in the ability to stand up after blows the world thought would keep us down forever. Vijay doesn't need the world to love him, doesn't need the world to clap, doesn't need his face on posters. He only needs one thing: the truth. And the truth is, he did not cheat in 1985. He did not cheat in 2013. He is not cold. He is a man the world has hurt too many times. He is not distant. He is a man who was never welcomed like the others. He is not arrogant. He is a man who never allowed himself to be weak. Vijay Singh is not just a story of talent, not just a story of discipline, not just a story of discipline, not just a story of victory. He is a story of resilience, of survival, about never letting pain define him. And America, the country that has looked at him with suspicion for so many years, needs to learn one lesson from his life. Greatness is not being loved. Greatness is getting back up when no one believes you can. Vijay never begged for pity, never begged for forgiveness, never begged anyone to look at him with softer eyes. He only asked for one thing: to be allowed to work, to practice, to compete, to live the way he believes is right. And that is the legacy of a misunderstood giant. A man the world never truly loved, but could never defeat either. His life is a reminder that some people are not born to be applauded, but to become symbols of silent strength. A strength that comes from darkness, from pain, from loneliness, yet can still light up an entire generation. And the most beautiful, most painful, most profound message Vijay Singh leaves for America is not every great person is loved, but every great person knows how to rise from pain. And then, after all the years of fighting the world, prejudice, loneliness, and the constant ache that has been the soundtrack of his life, Vijay Singh enters his later years in a way that takes your breath away. He grows old, but he does not fall. At an age when most people just want rest, Vijay still wakes before dawn, still warms up with a few stretches, still picks up the lightest club to hit a few dozen swings in the backyard. No longer 5 to 7 hours a day, no longer hundreds of bloody wedges like the old days, but he still practices, not to win, not to return to the top, but to remind himself that his heart still beats to the rhythm of golf, the sport that carried him when the world cruelly turned away. On quiet afternoons, people see him teaching quass every shot, patient as if he is passing down not just technique, but the spiritual inheritance of 2 generations. Vijay is not a man of many words, but the look in his eyes when he watches his son swing. The club says everything he never found time to apologize for during all those years on the road. And with Ardena, the woman who stood behind him from the days of poverty, from moldy boarding houses, from the days he was called a cheater, from the nights his body shook with pain, Vijay still loves her in the quietest way, staying close, sharing meals, holding her hand on walks, and never complaining about how life treated him. He doesn't have a loud life, no stage lights, no flashy speeches, but he has a simple, enduring, proud heart that only knows 3 things: work, endure, stand up again. That is how he lives at 62. That is how he has lived his entire life. And in the quiet of his life's sunset, when Vijay watches the sun sink below the Florida horizon, the light blazing across the lake in front of his house, he understands he has nothing left to prove, not to the PGA Tour, not to the media, not to the fans, not to anyone who ever misunderstood him, accused him, or turned their back on him. He only needs to live the rest fully, gently, calmly, without striving, knowing his soul has walked places not everyone has the courage to go. Vijay Singh's life is not the story of a winner adored by millions. It is the story of a silent warrior, a man who walked through fire so many times his body carries invisible scars only he can feel. But from that very silence, America has something important to learn. Cherish your health, because without it every dream crumbles. Cherish your family, because trophies can fill a cabinet, but only love fills a heart. Cherish the quiet ones, the ones who don't need applause but still give every breath to the work they believe is right. Vijay Singh is one of those people, a man who never demanded to be loved, never asked to be understood, never demanded the world remember him. He only asked to be allowed to keep doing what he has done since the day he picked up a broken club in Fiji, hit balls, work and rise from pain. And so when we look back at his life, from the poor kid outside the fence, to the man exiled in 1985, to the lone fighter in Nigeria, to the survivor in Europe, to the PGA Tour legend, to the victim accused again, to the guilt-ridden father, to the faithful husband, to the 62-year-old man, still fighting a degenerating back, we can only bow our heads. Not because he was great, but because he endured. Not because he was loved, but because he deserved to be. And from the peaceful space of his home, where the sunset falls across the lawn, and the soft sound of club meeting ball drifts in the evening breeze, we send him the sincerest, warmest, deepest gratitude. Thank you, Vijay Singh, for showing us that some people don't need applause to become legends. They only need a heart that never surrenders to pain. Looking back at Vijay Singh's life, we don't just see a golf legend. We see a man crushed by life again and again, yet who quietly got back up every time without needing anyone to cheer. It's hard not to feel a sting when we remember the barefoot boy in Fiji practicing with a broken club, standing outside the fence, watching rich kids laugh on the course, or the young man banned in 1985, branded a cheater before he could prove who he was. Then the exile years in a moldy room in Nigeria, the European tour sleeping in cheap hotels, eating half sandwiches to save money, until he finally reached the PGA Tour, but was still seen as cold, distant, never loved like Tiger, or worshipped like Mickelson. The deepest cuts were the private ones. 2004, when he won 9 times past Tiger, the world cheered, yet every morning he couldn't stand straight from back pain. Every night he sat in the dark rubbing knees swollen like balls. At home his son Kwas said the haunting words, "I know you love golf more than me." Then 2013, the deer antler spray scandal dragged him back into the cheater nightmare, forcing him to sue the PGA Tour itself to reclaim his honor. Yet at 62, with a degenerating back, aching legs, sleepless nights, doctors telling him to stop, he still practices alone at dawn, and tells his son, "I'm not afraid of dying, I'm only afraid of the day I can't hold a club anymore." That image will choke up any American who truly listens. A quiet, soft-spoken immigrant of color, no Hollywood hero, yet living true to the very last breath with 3 simple values: work, endure, rise again. In a society that sometimes worships glamour and fame, Vijay's story reminds us to cherish health before we lose it, to cherish family before our children have to grow up without us, and to cherish the quiet contributors, the ones who never demand applause, but are the silent pillars that keep America standing. If Vijay Singh's story of silent resilience has touched you, please hit subscribe to walk with us on more journeys full of tears and strength like this one. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video, where we continue to honor those who live quietly, but greatly.